Okay, thanks very much. My name is Gavin Cooney, and I am the founder and CEO of Learnosity. A little bit about us. My co-founder and I, Mark, we started Learnosity specifically in the learning industry because we really felt that education was the most important thing we could do, the most important contribution we could make to society. We didn't have, millions of books to go and build a company and trying to sell stuff out. So we wanted to find the way we can make the biggest impact. So how we decided we could do that was to power other people's products and make a bigger impact across the world. And what those things are components that other people use to build assessment products. Think about us like a box of Lego in the cloud that you could build learning products with. And that's kind of worked well. And I'm going to talk to you about how you should build a learning product. A little bit about, not invented here, but really it's about when you should not build your own software and you should buy it instead. Learnosity has been pretty successful. We're powering about 120 of the big names in learning. And just a minute about us. We've 21 million active users in the last 30 days. Back to school 2020 has been big for us. That's about 3 million students a day doing a test or homework on our platform. Last Thursday was a bumper day. We had 4.5 million students that day. And we've about 52.5 million questions authored and stored with us. So we're providing that service for our customers. Now, an assessment system in general, a learning system, an assessment product, they are deceptively complex. They are a bit like Mary Poppins handbag. There's more in there than you'd think. So an assessment really is table stakes. It's what you kind of need to build any product, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's difficult. And while you're building yourself and not licensing it, and there's other examples of this, you're actively losing ground to your competitors. So here's an anatomy of an assessment product. All of these things you need to build if you're building an assessment product. And it's the same in any industry. There's loads and loads and loads of things. There's loads of things to get busy with. And I guess the point of this is that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. And where you can license, you should. In our example, Learnosity does the red things and it does the blue things as well. I have to do that. And there's loads of green things there for the customers to work on themselves, but really they should be licensing parts of that system from other players. They should be licensing identity from Clever, for example, or payment stuff from Stripe, and never build something that they could license. It brings me to this point about undifferentiated heavy lifting. Jeff Bezos talks about this. Most of the time and effort and dollars and energy of building a business goes into stuff that's difficult and is generic, and really less of the time spent for where you actually add value. And that's crazy. So I'm going to try and present a framework of when you should build yourself and when you should buy. This is a common thing across the industry. Think about mapping software. All of the taxi apps, Lyft, Uber, I think in Europe called Free now, was called My Taxi. They all use Google Maps. And it seems like obvious that they would use Google Maps. Why would they go and try and map the world before they would build an application? If Lyft had decided to build their own mapping software rather than actively competing in the market, they'd be non-existent right now. These are the building blocks they use to get to market quicker. Uber did this a bunch of times. There's a bunch of things they added in, using Braintree for processing payments, Amazon Web Services, Twilio for messaging, and so on. Here's another example, Airbnb. Again, using a bunch of APIs to build software and get out properly. So when should you build your own solution? Well, think about this matrix. You have differentiated and undifferentiated or generic functionality. And then you have stuff that's low effort over to high effort. So if it's undifferentiated heavy lifting, if it's generic functionality, it's hard to do, you absolutely buy it. There's no glory in building it yourself. If it's low effort and still generic, you really should be buying that too. It should be cheaper, it should be commoditized, but you should be buying that if at all possible. Now in the top left-hand quadrant here, it's really an oxymoron. That's supposed to be a tumbleweed. There's nothing there. There's very little that's easy, low effort, and that's unique and really differentiates your business. There's nothing really there. So sure, if you can build it, if it's easy, then go for your life, but there's very little there. But over here is where you should spend your time. This is differentiated stuff. That's what you invent. That's where you add value. That's where you create value for your company. And that's what you should spend your time doing and not waste your time elsewhere. Now, there is a classic product management matrix as well. Now, this is not differentiation to undifferentiation. It's impact for your customers from high to low. And again, low effort to high effort for you to build these things. Now, there's a bit of a magnet there. You just keep on thinking, oh, let's do that quick win here in the bottom left-hand quadrant. But it's low impact to your customers, so don't do it. And then there's where companies will die, is doing low impact stuff that's high effort. What you really should be doing is doing the stuff that's low effort and high impact, do them first, and then move on to do the things that's high effort and high impact. Now, using an API, by buying software, what we're really doing here is we're moving everything, making it easier. There's a bunch of functionality in here that, I don't know, for example, we're building stuff that for anyone else would be undifferentiated, heavy lifting, would be generic bits of functionality, delivering a multiple choice question. That is absolutely, like, it's crazy for someone else to build. It's crazy for you to build your own identity stuff. It's crazy if you build your own credit card processing stuff. But what we're doing is you're really moving it over to the left for it to be bought there. And it's table stakes. It can be bought. It can be commoditized. And there it is in the low effort bucket. There's no point in spending a bunch of your time, a bunch of your cycles, your development effort, and so on to build something that's low impact for your customers. Now, it always comes down to a build versus buy decision. You'll ask your developers what you should build, and they'll always give you a really optimistic answer if they want to build it. And developers are generally people who like to solve problems, who like building software. And if they want to build it, they will give you a really low estimate. They'll leave out running costs. Same thing happens with my team. If I ask them how long it'll take to build something, they'll always tell me the number of weeks it'll take to build it. They never tell me how much it's going to cost to maintain that over a long period of time. And really what they're going to say is they're going to say the lowest possible time, the most optimistic time. It's going to be less likely than it's going to be more optimistic than even the most likely time or mean time. And it completely disregards any pessimistic answer. It completely disregards any idea of non-delivery, it being more complex than you thought, and so on. The risk of non-delivery here, the failed dev effort is huge. And with the industry we have, when we're trying to launch things every academic year, I mean, missing a year is a massive thing. What happens when things go wrong? What is that worst case scenario? We've had a few clients say no to us and come back to us 6 months later and buy it from us. We've never had anybody who came back 6 months later and said that it was easy and they got to market on time. It's never ever happened. And we've all been in those software projects. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And it just takes longer than you think. Ultimately, you're competing against the guy who licensed it and got to market like two years before you. So the cost of late delivery here really needs to be taken into account. It's a very rough diagram I did on my iPad. But people think about missing a year's revenue, say by it took me a year to build it myself. I could license it and get it done tomorrow. And they think about the year one revenue. But really, that's not what it is. What you're doing is you're pushing out all of your years out a year, and you're losing the last year of revenue. You're losing the maximum year of revenue. So in this case here, you're losing $4 million or $4, whatever the y-axis is. you're missing out on that last year of revenue because you didn't get to market on time and you pushed it out a year. And that's not something people think about. There's a fallacy of ownership that people believe that owning it yourself means zero downtime. And it doesn't. And without the scale, without the scale to deliver hard things properly, it often means much more downtime. I've spoken to a few people. I remember speaking to a guy who was the CTO of a big testing organization, and he just didn't want to use Amazon Web Services, for example. And he just told me, he looked me in the eye and he said that Amazon were down for 3 days last year. I was kind of going, like, that's just not true. Like, it just, that's just fake news, right? So, but he believes that doing it himself and owning his own servers is going to mean zero downtime. It just is not the case. I've been talking about this a bit lately when it comes to COVID, right? Just talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, life was going great before COVID. I'd also things planned. I was going to go to a hotel. I was going to go to Glastonbury. I had a holiday booked in Croatia, all these kind of things. And COVID kicks in and it focuses us down lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Here we are 6 months into it. And if you had told me 6 months ago that the economy wasn't going to completely collapse, food supplies wouldn't dry up, my family would be alive and so on, I would have taken your arm and all. It focuses us down to what's more important things. And in Maslow's hierarchy needs, shelter, safety, health, and so on. Software is a little bit like this. 50 years ago, you had to write your own software. You had to write zeros and ones. Then you had a programming language, the fourth generation programming language, and so on. And it's turtles all the way down. Where does it stop? Why don't you harvest your own electricity? Why don't you do more going down? There's a next logical step, rather. So it used to be that you'd have to write your own database. It seems absolutely insane that you would even ridiculous that you consider writing your own database right now. You'd run off-the-shelf databases. Or actually now, over the last couple of years, you'd have a managed database. And there's a tipping point to the next logical step. It makes obvious sense to not run your own database, not write your own database right now. You sacrifice complete control of writing it yourself for a service that gives you exactly what you need, and it's much more reliable. It's much, much better. So when I started my career, I ran my own servers. I ran cables. I had different data centers of different things. And now it seems kind of crazy that you'd do that. You'd use Amazon Web Services and so on. You don't run your own servers unless you're the CIA. And actually, the CIA don't even run their own servers. So with anything, with these APIs that are available now, you can either start with PHP and JavaScript, or you can start a level up. It is the next logical step. It is going up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You build on those things rather than building on a lower level technology like, say, PHP. Now, classic thing in computer science is Moore's law. You'll know about it. And it's true. The number of transistors are going up every single year, and they're doubling. Now, Moore's law is real, except for one thing. Technology is not getting cheaper and better in one thing. Developers are more expensive, and they're more rare, and they're harder to get every single year. So again, why would you build software that you could license yourself? Now, during COVID, we had an exponential growth in our users. This is the number of new users we've never seen before per week over the last few years. And it's a massive, massive spike during the COVID lockdown in March. And again, in back to school this year, where clearly there's a huge amount of students going online in that case. There's similar scrambling and unexpected loads happening. And you look at the graphs from Shopify or Zoom or Instacart or Amazon or Stripe or a bunch of things. And when it comes to these things, I think COVID really takes these things, brings their value to the forefront. Why would you want to be building that yourself right now in the middle of an emergency when you've got more problems, you've got bigger things to worry about? So I guess I'm appealing to you here that you buy it and you don't build it unless you absolutely have to. It's more expensive to build. It's more complicated to build. It really is deceptively expensive and difficult. You have to build it, and then you have to support it, improve it, patch it, port it to new technology. It ends up being less secure, less accessible. What happens when there's no delivery, when there's non-delivery or it's delayed? Your time to market is generally going to be pushed out. Hosting is something that people don't think about, and you do not have an economy of scale on that. We're delivering, as you said, 21 million active users this month, 4.5 million on a good day. Well, you don't have that economy of scale. So licensing it, or building it and hosting yourself is inherently more expensive. Tech debt is a nightmare. And really what API companies are able to do is go a mile deep and an inch wide on certain pieces of functionality. They go deeper than it would ever make sense for you to go. They have better, more detailed functionality that you have. They do things that wouldn't make sense for you. Going back up to the product matrix, they do stuff that would be in low value and high effort for you, but it brings it back over into that bottom left-hand quadrant. What's the opposite argument? It's pride. It's pride of ownership, of building generic functionality. There seems to be a lingering fear of losing control. I think it's a hangover from early software development projects that were outsourced to India. But today we don't outsource for, we outsource for expertise, not necessarily for cost savings. The cost savings come because of the economy of scale, but it's not the primary driver. And this pride of ownership, Marcellus Wallace, you know what he said about pride. These are all dated pop culture references, I understand. But all there is, building yourself, it's pride, and then it's more expensive, and it's worse. It's worse for your customer, and it means that you're not spending time going after the value that you really represent to your customers. So this is a call to action in the learning industry to license as much as you can, get to market quicker with better products, and not reinvent the wheel over and over again. Reinventing the wheel is an interesting analogy. Really, you're kind of driving the car and trying to change the wheel at the same time. A lot of these functionality, it's a lot more complex than a wheel. Thanks very much. If there's any questions, I'll answer them, but I don't think there is. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stacey. That you're boss because you are the boss. Buy anything, you don't care what it